All right, let's talk about red flags of real estate and what we can find before we even put an offer to purchase.
Okay.
Let's start on the outside. What do you see as a realtor walking through that a normal home buyer might not see? And I'll just add on too.
First things first, the foundation. Let's talk about that. You have lines and cracks in the foundation that you need to have checked.
Do you know what causes most of those cracks in the foundation? And what scares the piss out of people and it really shooting most of the time?
What is it?
The downspouts are too full. Homeowners, empty your downspouts. For the love of God, you are destroying your house. Most of the time, whenever we see it, the downspouts are full or they just drain directly down into one hole on the corner of the house.
Wears it out?
Yeah, it straight up wears it out. It's sort of like your fingers. You sit in a swimming pool too long and they get wrinkly. Well, that's what's happening to your block work, people. Make your downspouts run the water away from the house, not just the splash guard. Get it away from your house. It'll save you a ton of money and a huge inspection report, because if you get that on an inspection report, it's going to be costly.
It is.
What else you see foundation-wise?
Tree roots. Tree roots can be very, very dangerous when it comes to your foundation. They need to be trimmed. If they're growing towards your foundation, they push on your foundation wall, and it could be a very big problem.
You know, a lot of times what I see is older properties that they built a huge oak or left a huge oak tree in their front yard, and they've built a sidewalk going to the front door. And next thing you know, you see those roots that are popping up that concrete. Big tip for me is if you're actually planting trees, make sure you plant them far enough away from your house that those trees actually have a way to expand and they can grow on their own without actually pushing onto your house or a extra retaining wall that you've got sitting around the house going to the basement, stuff like that. We usually see those pushing quite a bit.
Bellowing out.
Yes, and then they just start bowing, and the next thing you know, they fall over. You're $10,000-$15,000 in repairs just because you put a tree 3, 4, 5 foot too close to it. Make sure you put the right kind of tree close to your house too.
Absolutely. Crawl spaces. Vapor barriers.
Vapor barriers are huge. What's a vapor barrier? Tell everybody.
It's a plastic that's put on the ground inside your crawl space that keeps down moisture.
Yeah, so for those of you who don't know, and if you're redneck like me, we use vapor barriers for other things, aka a slip and slide. Because you got a big boy like me going down a slip and slide, woof, and you got to be able to hold it. You can't use that thin stuff. It's got to be the thick plastic for a vapor barrier. If not, stuff's going to poke holes in it. How do you know if there is moisture in the basement or crawl space area by just looking at the ceiling joist? Do you know?
Sometimes you can see spot mold.
Yep, see a lot of mold spots that are growing on there. We can't really use the word mold. Home inspector's not gonna use the word mold. They're gonna use
fungus.
Fungus. There's a fungus among us. Other things that you'll notice is if it's really damp, your insulation will start to sag.
Or even sweat.
Yeah, so a lot of times your HVAC systems will sweat, and especially with really older homes. I actually have a house that I own from 1918, and that thing sweats more than me whenever I go inside church.
Jesus Christ.
Yes, exactly. That's why I sweat a lot. Any other big red flags that you see foundational wise that we should be looking at, home buyers should be looking at before you even put in the offer? Because we don't want you to get into a spot where you put in an offer, you already saw these kinds of things, and then it's like, we just want to get the house. There's a lot of crappy agents out there that would just overlook these kinds of things and be like,
make a paycheck.
Yeah, just trying to get through. Our agents aren't going to do that. We're going to straight up tell you, hey, these are some things that we might be having to fix or ask for repairs. And if we want to do that, what do we do?
Put it on the additional provisions addendum.
Yeah, so if we automatically know that something is jacked up, go ahead and ask for it on there. And then that way you know it's going to be fixed. Seller can't tell you no after you've already put $5,000, $10,000 down in due diligence money.
Absolutely.
Let's go to the roof.
The roof.
What do you look for on a roof for a red flag?
Missing shingles or shingles that are lifted. That's the major one. A discoloration that tells that it's an older roof and probably needs to be repaired or replaced.
So I would definitely be looking at the disclosures and seeing how old the major systems are across the board, but Roof is definitely going to show its age. Even your insurance won't cover you sometimes if your roof is too old. There's a couple insurance companies I know out there that don't really ask that questionnaire question. So if you need that, let me know. We can help you out. But
Also, certain loans won't qualify if the roof is also too old.
yep. So another thing that I look at on a roof is if it has a chimney, there is what's called flashing. And it's this little, usually black tar, sometimes it's silver, that goes around the chimneys or any vents, the boots on the top. And if it's cracking, that probably means that it's going to leak or is leaking currently. So always look at that little flashing if you can see it. A lot of times we can't as an agent, and I hate to tell you, I'm a big boy. I'm not crawling up on top of anybody's roof, and I'm scared of it. So, but that's something we do with the home inspections that they always check out for us too. You know, make sure you got a good home inspector with a good drone or set of binoculars or willing to crawl up there. Isn't that right?
Make sure, as long as they don't use the naked eye.
And yeah, naked eye probably ain't going to get it done unless you like 25 vision. But I mentioned something else, a roof boot. Do you know what a roof boot does?
No, I don't.
A roof boot is actually the exhaust for your fart fans, people. So it comes up and it's just it looks like a PVC pipe and it's got a rubber piece that goes around it. You want to make sure that those aren't cracked. Now, that being said, those are pretty easy fixes. So not a real big deal right there. So it shouldn't be a deal killer, but it should be something that you're aware of, especially if you're really tight on your budget.
Mm-hmm. The chimney, if it does have a chimney, make sure that if it's closed off, it's capped off correctly. And also if there's no missing bricks and things of that nature that can make it not safe structurally.
Yeah, and sometimes even the mortar will be like starting to give way, you know, start to lean and things like that, and then you've got an even bigger issue that's going on. It's small things like this that save you a lot of time and energy. And us as agents, we're not going to let you just buy something without being aware that some of these things are going on. What's some red flags for electrical?
Outlets with 2 prongs instead of 3, or breakers. Not updated electrical boxes. It's a biggie.
Sometimes there's these old school, looks like came out of your grandma's house. There's screw-in electrical fuses. A, they are really expensive to fix, but B, it can be somewhat of a fire hazard. Now, it's not something, again, to run away from, but it's something to be aware of, because in the future, you might be okay with it as a buyer, but as the next buyer that comes along, they might not be okay and be asking you to rewire the whole house.
To bring it up to code.
Yeah, and then there's also, in really, really old houses, there's knob and tube wired. So to find that, it's these little porcelain pieces that the wire runs across it, and they're little insulators. And so they screw it into a piece of wood truss, you know, floor joist, whatever it is, and then they run the wire across it and goes across it. So it just sort of almost looks like a set of Christmas lights with no lights in the middle of it. And that is really old wiring.
I don't think I've come across that either.
Well, it's like early 1900s kind of wire. The other end of it is since it's aluminum wire, it can be a fire hazard. Now, one thing that you need to know is with aluminum wiring, they have special switches and special outlets for aluminum wiring, because it will not hold like a regular copper wire. So if you use a copper wire style outlet or switch, you could catch your house on fire pretty quickly. So
That's a no-no.
yeah. Well, it depends on how much insurance money you want. Make sure that you're just aware of those kinds of situations. Other things that I would mention is check the breaker box. Do you know what a Zinsco breaker box is?
I do not.
All right, so
Tell us, Dustin.
there's a certain type of breaker box that has had a huge class action lawsuit.
Okay.
And those breaker boxes probably cost $3,000 to $5,000 depending on how much work you got to. But you literally need to change out the whole breaker box. Pull the whole breaker box out and put new breakers in. So it's a lot of work. If you've got a Zinsco box, you might want to put that in what?
An additional provisions addendum.
Yes, put it in the additional provisions addendum right from the get-go, and you should be okay. Other things that I would mention is, me as a redneck handyman kind of stuff, I want to look at the breaker box and see if there's any extra space. So if I want to add a 220 outlet in my garage, or if I want to add extra outlets around TVs or stuff like that, do I have anywhere to put those? Again,
Will it be supported?
yeah, again, it's not a deal breaker, but I just need to know sort of what I'm working with right here before I even put my offer in.
Let's talk about plumbing.
Yeah, what's our plumbing red flags? What's the very first thing that you think of as a realtor whenever you look?
The polybutylene pipes.
So you're talking about the white, red, and blue plastic pipes that are ran through a house. You wouldn't need to
No.
not stay away from those?
It's a form of plastic, but it's not that. I think usually they're like grayish
They
color.
are gray, I believe.
Yeah.
Yep.
And what happens is they're connected with these metal connectors, rings, and they leak. And it could be a very big problem. They break down over time and they leak.
Yeah, the crazy part about those pipes are it's a pinhole leak. So it's not like it's gonna gush and like you hit a line. It's just gonna slowly leak and slowly go into your crawl space and
Deteriorate.
Yeah, make termites show up and crap like that.
So that's a big red flag. You would definitely want to have those redone.
So other things that I would be a huge red flag for me plumbing wise is if it is soft spots around the toilet. A lot of times people aren't changing the rings off the toilets. You know, kids rock back and forth like they're riding a bucking bronco, and then next thing you know, it feels a little bit soft around your toilet. Why? Because it's got a slow leak every time you flush it. It's quite disgusting when you think about your poop water is rotting out the subfloor and everything else, but that's what the soft spots are around there. And so you could be replacing a whole floor joist, and a whole bathroom. And this is something that you can walk around, just put your foot down and press around those toilets and see what's going on. Other thing I like to do personally is I like to look underneath sinks.
Absolutely.
If you look underneath the sink, you can see if that's polybutylene pipe that's down there, because everywhere through a house doesn't have to be the exact same piping material. But you can also see if a sink's been leaking. Or if you have a basement, you can see if there's a water spot sitting there, if bathtub shower's been leaking, things like that. And just save you a lot of time, energy, and headache by not going under contract without knowing these things.
It's especially important to look if you have more than one level under bathrooms and bathtubs and things of that nature. If anything's leaking, you usually have a wet spot or a watermark on the ceiling below. Yeah,
my shower leaked all over my living room for quite a few months until it finally just fell through and I didn't know it.
Wow.
It was on Christmas Day. It was awesome. It was Merry Christmas. I thought Santa Claus was
Santa
coming.
Claus was coming.
I thought he was coming through. He missed his chimney. Instead, he went through the shower. So it just sort of, my ceiling fell down a little bit right there. Got to fix that. But even realtors have these kinds of problems, people.
Absolutely. Let's talk about flooring. You definitely want to look and see if you feel any soft spots when you're walking. That can indicate a problem with the joists, which you will see in the crawl space.
So if you go and you see that the floor is unlevel, a good trick that you can do is take a golf ball with you, a marble, a tennis ball, whatever you got. Put your kid on the floor and slide him across there, see if he goes to one side or the other, whatever. But you can feel if the floor is unlevel. A lot of times people come in and try to jack a floor up. Now, back in the day, it was up to code. You put whatever you wanted to underneath it and whatnot. Now, it has to be a concrete pillar that needs a concrete foundation pillar first, and then, whatever they want to use to code. Usually it's cinder blocks that they come up, but you'll see a lot of dry stacking of wood in older houses. Same house I was talking about, the sweating of HVAC, it's like a roller coaster in there. But the way I look at it too is, sometimes you've got to look at a house and say, my house, for example, is built in 1928. It probably ain't moving too much more than what it already has.
Settling.
It's settled as much as it's going to do, and we're pretty good to go, but I need to keep an eye out on these things. So it's not something that I was extremely worried when I bought that property. Another thing that I'm going to look for whenever I'm looking at the floor joists, columns, whatnot, is to make sure there's no termite damage on all that stuff. So if that could be causing some of the stress to happen in unleveled floors because they've ate through a floor joist. So that might be what's causing the issues off of there. I look at door jambs, see if they've got any water damage.
One thing I think is important too, that if you do walk through a property and they have aerial rugs, it's important to lift those rugs and see the state of the flooring underneath the rug.
I don't know how many times I've heard horror stories. Something is totally missing, or there's a big spot where the cat peed all over the floor, and then it's just dark black, and they can't do anything about it.
A hole.
Yeah, holes. I tell you what's terrible. Kids' bedrooms. The best the property is ever going to look is the day that you purchase it, for the most part, because all these kids, you know, they spill drinks on their nightstands, whatnot, and that carpet has been stained because they didn't want to tell mom and daddy they had a drink in their bedroom. Move crap around if you're serious about it.
Yep.
If not, you're going to find some stuff that you probably aren't going to be real happy about at some point sooner or later. All right, so here's what I'm going to say as a whole. Yeah, we're telling you all these red flags. We're not doing this to scare you away from a property. We're just here to make you aware of what's going on with the property, and are you going to still be okay with this situation? You know, there's a lot of times that a home inspector can't test certain parts of it because they can't get to it, or if it's cold in the winter, they can't turn the AC on. So, or
if it's hot in the summer, they can't turn the heat on.
Right. So it just depends on what kind of system you've got working on and things like that. So we're just here to try to warn you and say, hey, this is some stuff that might happen. We're here to try to help you find your dream property. But we're also not here to just make a paycheck and go on to the next property. So we care way more about our clients being happy in the long run than we do just getting you into a home and saying, oh, you can figure it out whenever you get there.
Absolutely.
So stay away from all those red flags. If they're in there, what do?
Put it on the additional provisions addendum.